Good evening, everybody. This is AOD Institute of Education. I'm Dwayne, and this is the Diploma of Alcohol and Other Drugs. Tonight, for the third session, we've got CHCMHS011, Assess and Promote Social, Emotional, and Physical Wellbeing. As I said, this is the third session of three. Next week, we've got a new one on, I think it's something about managing coexisting needs or something like that. But if you've got a schedule, you probably see that yourself. So just before we start, we'll jump onto the acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayden Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. So with that in mind, we'll just jump onto housekeeping. Just the general expectations for the classes every week. We've got, obviously, because we're a Canberra college, if we come to class, then please camera on just so that we can interact and everybody's on the same level. Jumping on camera is, it takes effort to put yourself out there and half confidently say, hi, this is me. So if all of us do that, it is helpful. Microphones off, just so there's no feedback, any distractions through the microphone can get a bit difficult. Obviously, class break times after an hour to try and look after ourselves, and with a bit of self-care, we'll do a break every hour, 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock for 10 minutes. Obviously, we are a class looking at interaction and trying to get to the bottom of what we're talking about. So interaction is needed. We love to hear from you. Please use the Zoom reactions button to put your hand up. That just means that you jump to the front of the queue, the front of all the reminds me of the Muppet Show. When I was tiny, we had the Muppet Show and all the little people in all the little boxes. That's like 30 years before Zoom. It's crazy. That was an amazing distraction. I'll keep that now. So respectful relationships, be mindful and kind with your words. Obviously, we're all in this learning together. That's important. No smoking or vaping on camera or drinking alcohol. We wouldn't ask anybody of any learners that we wouldn't expect in industry. It's a bit like a TAFE class or a working meeting, employment meeting. So we wouldn't be smoking, vaping, alcohol in there. Equally, triggers. If somebody comes to class, they don't want to see somebody smoking or having a beer on camera. That's not what we want to do. And be kind to yourself. A few hours of study, a few hours of anything in one day can be overwhelming. So you've just got to put back into yourself. So whether that's from work or class or anything else that you're doing, look after yourself. So just to start off, yeah, shivers. Can anybody hear me or not? Oh, you can. Okay, Matt, you can hear me. Ian can hear. Okay. Phil, you might need to turn your hearing aid up. Is that all right?
John?
Is that everything good, Phil? Oh, your signal looks like it's really low, Phil. Yeah. Bobby who said leave and join again. That helps me when not when I struggle to hear. Struggling to hear is a completely different issue. Um, but right, let's start. Got way too distracted already. Social networks, just to start off. So we're looking at, as I said, we're looking at a holistic area, assess and promote social, emotional, and physical well-being. The whole area, social, emotional, and physical, it's all of these made up. And right in the middle there is our holistic self, I guess you could call it. It's putting in our hobbies, it's putting in any volunteer work that we do, any personal interests that are separate, our education and employment, our community, whether that's our um, family of origin community, um, our family as we are now, that community. Um, so they all make up who we are.
It's 19 years old. And where is that? That is not the average which has it was a sandwich, but he was doing it. That's me about this one.
So when we're exploring social networks, not everybody has all of these. Not everybody has like every different arena of life. Like some people might not be in employment, some people might not be in education. Some people are in a season of life where there might not be any hobbies or personal interests. I think that's called parenting. You don't have any hobbies, personal interests, because it's just the way it is. Life is just family and employment sometimes. Um, so that means if there's some of these missing, it doesn't mean somebody's less of a person. That's what we're trying to convey, obviously. The the more arenas of life somebody has, it can be overwhelming and it can enrich their life. So looking at employment, education, and volunteering, they're a couple of the key ones. Employment, um, I think Karl Marx maybe, and a few psychologists have said that our employment is the most important thing that we can do for our our whole well-being. Um, which means without employment, people can really take emotionally take a dive, which is obviously something we've got to watch out for. Community hobbies and interests, they're our like periphery, the things that a lot of people would say that if we they're not necessarily necessary. So if we have time and space for these, that's awesome. But not everybody does. It's a bit of a privilege to explore these areas of who we are. So just looking at social networks, there was a doco on, it was either, I think it was ABC about people's like people's social web that they have. It doesn't matter how many friends that they've got, like they might have genuinely got a lot of friends. And they looked at friends on Facebook as well and social media, where people can have many, many, many friends. But realistically, you only have time to input into less than five to like really engage with them. And then there's a a circle of relationships just outside of that, which might be about 10, a dozen, something like that. And we try and meet with them, but we don't always succeed. So it's the three or four maybe that are the most important to us right now. That they would be the ones that we try and engage with. But then if we try and engage with more than that, we're going to feel like we're spreading them very thinly, and we're not actually giving all of them equal value. And then beyond the maybe 12, it's said that a lot of people have many, many more friends that they would actually value, but they don't get the chance to see because they might be living a long way away, and might be living in another country, or they might be living close, but they just never get time because of the tight community that they already have. It does help to try and map these out and try and understand whether that's on a piece of paper or in our head, if we're visual people, to map out those people that we do spend a lot of time with. And other people are saying that we are the people that we spend most of our time with, whether that's like emotionally or personality wise, whether it's sense of humor or mental health wise, we are the people that we spend most of our time with around, whether they are a positive influence or a negative influence. And we are, we're always going to influence somebody, and we are always going to be influenced by people if we're spending time with them. Which means that we've got to, whether we're talking to clients or we're thinking about that ourselves, then we've got to be like mindful of that, because we've got to be helping them remember that wherever they want to go in life, the people that surround them, whether it's the 3 or 4 or whether it's the 10 to 12, they are the people that are going to take them where they want to go. And equally, in addiction, that's the same story that they'll tell us. That the reason that they got here in the first place in the addiction wasn't chosen. Nobody chose addiction, but they got here because of those people that they were spending time with. And they're not blaming those people. They're just saying that slowly they saw themselves descend into that lifestyle. So mapping out our social networks is really helpful. Whether that's levels of social inclusion or exclusion, and realizing that the people that are around us, they are the ones that are helping us feel excluded from community, or they're the ones that are helping us feel included in community, whether that's like cultural community or whether that's our friends and social community. We're not feeling part of our friends because of the people that are around us feeling left out, or we're not feeling part of our family community because of the people that we're around feeling excluded. So it does help to map them out and evaluate them, see where they're going, see where we've come from. So with that, looking into your social communities, your social networks, then just have a think. And if you were to map out your social networks, and you could probably only do 3, maybe 4 from each one. So if I just skip back a few slides. This one, looking at that for you, can you name like 3 people from each? Or if you're really, really quick, maybe like how many people would you classify you have in each area? And like I said, if you've got employment, volunteering, and hobby, because you're very, very busy and that's literally the only time that you have in your week, that's fine. Who would those people be? I do quite often forget that I probably spend more time with my workmates than I do with my family. And it's like, I forget it and then remember every now and again, wow, I spend more time there than with my kids in over a 3-year period, whether it's partner or children. It's like I've spent more time with him and him than any other thing, which is 2 workmates getting closer and closer together and becoming more alike and like partners. Crazy. So yeah, just have a think of the who you would have on these different networks and see if you can come up with a number for each one. Anybody jump in? Yes, Ian, go for it.
I think I haven't got the exact numbers, but I know that most of mine sit within education, i.e. school friends and employment, which is work friends on Facebook. But then if I look at LinkedIn, it's, 99% employment. And in fact, at one point we gave up using business cards and just joined on each other on LinkedIn to get each other's
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah, it was too, you put business cards, you lose them. At least if you're on LinkedIn, you can find people again.
I've never really got into it. And people telling me that like I really should, but yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
didn't realize it was that powerful.
the problem is I think I ended up with about 1,400 people on LinkedIn, and I then set a task that if I was going to invite somebody, I had to get rid of 10 others. So
Oh my
just to
gosh, you were one of them.
try and get rid of people.
Wow. So yours were mainly education, you said.
Education and employment, yeah.
Right, okay.
I mean,
Anybody else?
that's all I did for a long while. So
Marty, your mic's open, so that must mean you're ready to shout out something as well.
Can anybody hear me? I'm having trouble with my headset tonight.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I've been in and out of the room all night trying to get it reset. So I've totally missed the question, and I'm not sure
It's all right.
what the discussion is. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. As long as you hear it and you're calm, it's fine. Anybody else? Some numbers for any of these areas from anybody. No? Okay. Everybody's tired or go on, Justin.
I was trying not to talk because that's what I always bloody do. But realistically for me, it's probably 3 to 5 in each circle. Like
Yeah.
that's honestly
Okay.
like there's probably 20 people at work, but I only speak to 2 or 3 of them realistically. Like I may have their details, but reaching out for them on a social level is pretty non-existent. I
Yeah.
do have a lot of people in hobbies, but that's because I collect things.
Okay.
But again, that's more of a business transaction as well. I wouldn't call it like a social. I suppose it is, but it's not like we go out and have tea parties talking about what we collect. It's more of a business sort of thing. I don't volunteer. Education is honestly just all the guys here. Like I've got a few emails, but on a social level, do I reach out? Probably not, So like
Yeah, I know what you mean.
max in most of these is like 3 to 5 people.
So when we're talking to a client and somebody says that it's maybe they only know people from the employment is, that's all the people they know, and they are they're struggling, they're not wanting to use again, they're frightened of using again, or it's causing them mental health issues because people at work are so toxic. So we've got the client there in the middle. So clearly that connection is very, very strong. Quite often there's not a lot we can do about it. With that connection, there's not a lot we can do about that connection. So what we're going to be doing is trying to say, okay, this is all potentially part of you. So if this one is the one that's the toxic connection, you can't reduce, or maybe you can, maybe some people can reduce the amount of hours that they're working, they're spending at work. But most people can't because they've got bills to pay, they've got commitments to do, they've got contracts to fulfill. So the 40 hours is not going to be reducible. And that's if it is 40 hours, maybe it's 50 hours. But what about the time outside work? How can they build something in their life somewhere around here that is going to be something positive for them, something meaningful, something like in the housekeeping, something that puts into them rather than drains them. Like they're saying it's toxic, they're saying this place is toxic because it's sucking the life out of them, it's sucking the positive energy out of them, it's sucking anything that they've got is gone when just because of this one. So trying to get this in somewhere, whether it's like community or some sort of volunteering, Saturday morning, and the kickback is obviously is going to straight away be, well, when have I got time for that, or when have I got the emotional energy for that? Because of putting so much here, can't possibly go out into all of this. And we're not saying like, all right, give your whole Saturday over to something. It's simply just engaging in something else. Literally, like, because of the intensity of this connection, this relationship here, literally an hour a week different that isn't just detoxing, watching TV, is going to be life affirming rather than sucking the life out of them. It might even be that they're working in an office, financial type thing, admin area, and then they go and help out in a aged care home on a Sunday morning. And at first they say, no way would I do that. And then when they do, it's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And that's how I got into drugs and alcohol work. I was a teacher and somebody said, oh, the rehabber wanted somebody. And I was like, no way am I working in rehab. And then eventually I went there and I spent longer there, spent 8 years there, like better than any other job that I ever had. So it's the connections that we didn't even realize that we could make that are potentially so empowering and life-changing, really. So I'll just skip on a bit. And while I remember, I know this course is Diploma in Alcohol and Other Drugs, but with that in mind, the module that we're doing is based around mental health. It's not about the alcohol and drugs. It's specifically about mental health. So I'll just remind you of that when we're looking at assessments, when we're doing role plays, when you're doing any kind of quiz or question. This unit applies to work with people living with mental illness in a range of community services and work contexts. So this module, it maybe somebody's studying to be an aged care worker, or maybe somebody's studying to be a youth worker. They could equally do this module because it's about engaging that client with the mental illness issue. So we're looking at this from the alcohol and drugs perspective. So we've got a drug and alcohol client, or somebody who's struggling with drinking, and we're looking at it as their holistic life, looking at their whole well-being, but from the mental illness side, not from the alcohol and drug side. And when I say mental illness side, I mean simple stress, workplace stress, personal stress, undiagnosed anxiety, undiagnosed depression, family and relationship struggles, all of that sort of thing. So it's looking at it from looking at AOD and well-being from the mental illness side. Okay, just been given some sad news because somebody's not going to be here anymore, unless they sign up to another course, obviously. Like commit to a new diploma or something like that. Right, so moving on. Social networks. So strategies for enhancing the social network. Empowerment, meaning we can't change anybody's life. We can empower them to change their own. We can empower them to help them realize that we can support them into taking control and making their life bigger, making whatever area of their life that they're wanting to focus on, making that bigger by empowering them, giving them power. Interpersonal skills. When it says skill, it means that it's not something that we're born with. Somebody might seem like they were born to be a real community person or a sociable person, but it's a skill that people learn. And if you're struggling to learn a skill, then you go and try to find out how, which is why everybody's here, or which is why we're going to education, study education. We're learning new skills, new way to do things. Okay, Phil's going to pop out and come back. Yeah. Role plays. And when I did study a few years ago, just before COVID, a couple of years before COVID, I got into, it was postgraduate education. And when they told me that studying counselling and at postgraduate education, we were role playing, I thought, what? It's postgraduate education. So like I've studied, and now to be assessed, I'm going to be doing a role play. Are you serious? I was quite shocked, but it's a great way to engage and make sure that we can be assessed in that. I was taken aback, but it's the way to do it in community services. It's what did Marty call it? A couple of weeks ago, he was saying scenarios. So in the ambulance, they would role play, but it's a scenario, a life-saving scenario. And even when you get first aid, if you do a first aid course, you're just role playing with your mate or a dummy on the floor still. So it's role plays. That's what we're doing. That's how we get assessed. So when we're looking at emotional well-being, we've got self-care, relationships, and support systems. They're very, very different. Self-care is quite an important one. We've got to focus on self-care, especially when we forget about it because life is so busy. We're not caring for self. We're literally just doing, and all the time doing, whether that's doing a work because that's who we feel like we are, with that person that goes to work, or we doing family, that family has to happen, family has to keep going all day, every day, food, children, housework, and then bed, and then up for work. Self-care has to come into that somewhere. Self-care can overlap with the relationships, potentially, but it doesn't always, because sometimes relationships can be taken out of us as well. And we're putting into relationships more than the relationship is giving back to us. So that's got to be important. And then general support systems. That could be genuine mentor meetings or coaching. I know a lot of people in business who they might go for a blood check like every year. They might get some sort of screening for their health, maybe every 12 months as well. But every month they might meet with a few other, not colleagues, but other business partners, and just chat and support each other and say, how are we going to get, how are we going to progress in life this month? And it's literally just about mutual support. And that kind of community, whether that's a religious community, whether that's a hobby, personal interest community, that kind of support system is really, really valuable. Traditionally, it used to be, it could equally be after work, meeting at the pub, which is, I know we're talking alcohol and other drugs, but going to the pub and meeting some mates as a social support system could well be healthy for some people. When emergency first aid or trauma first aid, when the first responders are going out to like bushfires and traumatic incidents, catastrophes, big catastrophes, then for the therapy, they are encouraged to talk to somebody. And the lists of somebody that the psychologist are telling them is maybe you might not talk to a line manager, maybe you might not talk to a partner, maybe you might need to go to the pub and chat about this incident with your mates, like in that order. If you can't do that, then do that, because it's not good to deal with this thing on your own. And that's a massive catastrophe that they're referring to. But when people are studying trauma, that could be trauma with a big T. But we might be dealing with stress and small trauma every day. Or we might have clients that are. So they're going to need to download, they're going to need to de-stress in that kind of area. So with emotional well-being, got a quick video. So I'll put the link in chat as usual. And it started, right? 2 minutes. So I'll just give you this link. Okay, if you go to chats, I'll put the link there, and then everybody mute your mic and click on it, and we'll come back in 2 minutes. Okay, comments, disagreements, agreements, anything about the video? Loved it? Cool. Martin?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting at the end they were talking about the secret to emotional well-being, and the top of the list was a sense of contentment. And when during my recovery, in the depths of that place that I wasn't happy to be in, I could never ever see myself being happy, but I was quite ready to accept a feeling of contentment, because in my mind, contentment can encompass a range of emotions. And it wasn't until many years later that happiness, a sense of happiness returned. And I think that's the secret is to be content without striving for any one particular emotion.
Yeah, definitely.
That's my experience anyway.
Mm. Yeah. Anyone else? A few people liked it. I realized that it's videos like that are can be very oversimplified. Like if and it will get used like that. Like, okay, so you've been clinically depressed for maybe a couple of years. Okay, well, do these 5 things and it'll all be fine. And that's not what the video's saying. It's so not what the video's saying. Um, because things that need medical intervention or clinical intervention, they work hand in hand. Now, when somebody that has been diagnosed with a serious mental health disorder, I know for a fact that psychiatrists and psychologists are going to be referring to things like that to work with medication. A lot of time, the medication that's prescribed is just to take the edge off some of the symptoms so that we can think clearly and then make logical. Can't think logically. Make logical steps forward, logical thoughts forward, rather than making life choices out of a backward step of feeling like the world is against us or we're outside of the world. But turning it around and taking the edge off some of the symptoms that make us feel like that is quite often the way that the medical professionals are wanting to start. Yeah, repetitive practice. We are who we interact with, and we are what we do. I'll just move that on a little bit. So mindfulness is really important as well. Mindfulness separate from meditation. Meditation, a lot of time they get confused, but they're mutual. You can do both. You can do either, but you can do one or the other as well. And it's about the cognitive area of our brain, so that we're trying to build. We're trying to build our thinking in a certain way. With coping strategies, mindfulness, relaxation. When our autonomic nervous system, when our whole nervous system, we've got fight, flight, freeze on one side, and then we've got rest, digest, relax on the other. And our nervous system is either on or off with one or the other the whole time. You can't have them both on, and you can't have them both off. So one of them will always, it's like a seesaw balancing act, but one of them must be on at any one time. And if we're living in fight, flight, stress, anxiety, we literally can't move our nervous system into fight, into rest, digest, relax, turn off the adrenaline, turn off the cortisol. Our body won't let us, which is why there's other bodily functions that work on either side of that as well. Like we can't digest our food if we're in stress mode. We can't get the nutrition out of our food. And we get bowel complaints as well because the food won't digest. We can't get to sleep if we're in stress mode because our body won't let us relax enough. Eventually, we might shut our eyes for a few hours, but we don't get the sleep that we need. Sorry, Marty, go on. All right. Learning about this in DBT as well. Yeah, DBT is really, really useful. This is almost with coping strategies. This is almost going into CBT, but DBT is another level. It's like a massive toolkit of just thinking strategies. It's really good. It's really good to study DBT, even, sorry, my mind's gone around in three ways. DBT is really helpful for bipolar disorder and significant mental health issues, but it's really good to study DBT even without it, even without any of the disorder, just to get like strategies for dealing with different life events. It's really cool. It said mindfulness twice. So meditation would mean, just in case you don't know, I'm just going to pretend you don't know. Meditation would be taking some time out of your day to engage with a part of you that you want to be, I guess, is the easiest way to explain it. It might be 5 minutes in the morning, it might be 5 minutes in the night, but you're literally taking time out of where you are and what you're doing to go and be somewhere else in your body, in your mind. Mindfulness is not that at all. Mindfulness is being here right now and, like the video said, realizing your emotions, accepting your emotions and feeling them, and feeling the sensations in your body that the emotions are bringing, and not trying to get out of where we are now, but trying to focus our mind into embracing where we are in the physical and in the emotional. So if we're feeling stressed, a lot of times mindfulness can be feeling the woolly socks on your feet, feeling the leather chair on your legs, and it could be feeling the plastic pen in your hand and your fingers, and feeling the microphone on your face, or the headphones on your head, the cotton shirt on your body. And once our mind is focusing on all of these sensations, we kind of overload the brain to take the stress up, remove the stress, because our brain can't focus on everything at the same time. And there's so many different things about mindfulness that we can do. We can do like looking around the room and think, okay, 3 things I can see, 2 things I can hear, and 1 thing I can smell. And it's different things like that that are really helpful for focusing our brain. It's not about controlling your mind, but to be present, acknowledging, recognizing your mind. As your mind wanders, put it back and bring to the exercise, bring it back to what you were doing. Yeah. Because it's hard to focus your mind for a certain amount of time, which is why meditation might be really, really difficult. But mindfulness is about being here and embracing where you are. Which means if you're in a really stressful job or a stressful relationship, trying to be mindful is really, really helpful. It helps you think logically. Self-compassion, self-care, we've already mentioned that. I think this is a big TED talk, so we'll come back to this in a minute. Come on. So cultural and spiritual well-being. I think I mentioned last week when clients that have come to a rehab and they're from any strong culture, whichever culture it is, whether it's like indigenous, Lebanese, strong Catholic community, anything with a really dominant or strong family heritage culture, it's quite often that the younger person has detached from that culture, whether it's a spiritual one or a cultural one. And when they start to engage back with that culture, it means that we get a renewed sense of empowerment and renewed sense of identity, and realize that they don't understand why they detached from it in the first place, which is helpful because a lot of the senior elders in their culture that we're talking about would be happy to quite often come into the rehab or come into a youth club and talk about that culture. And when you get a really good community, when you get a really good, wise, senior member of that culture that will come in and talk to young people, it's fantastic to watch them really engage with younger people. It's really, really good. So whether it's like an imam or a priest or and one of the elders from a community, any one of them, that seems like the older and wiser they are, the more happy they are to come and engage as well. So it's a positive step. So when we're thinking about the cultural spiritual well-being, it might be that they need education about their own community. It might be something to do with language, like official language or an unofficial language. The English words that we use, it might be something about that, but it might also be to do with them learning, relearning, or going back to their original language of the community that they're talking about. We have to create connections. When we're creating connections, it's referrals in the end, but it's contacting certain people, contacting specific people that are going to be able to support them and engage them, because they can then provide advice and support. If somebody needs to have support setting up, rebuilding their life in recovery, or just looking for a job, looking for volunteer work, looking for education possibilities, it's these connections that are really going to help them. And then reflecting on that. We'll just go back to that other video. I think that's probably, yeah. It's 20 minutes long because it's a TED talk. So I think I have it on during break, and then we'll come back after, well, at 10 past, and we'll have a bit of feedback about that. So I'll give you it now, and you can still get a break. You can still sit and listen. Just reading some of the comments on the video to start off about self-compassion. Very hard to do. Yeah, definitely. Easier said than done. It really is. Yeah. With self-compassion, a lot of people, somebody would describe it as trying to put ourselves in the place of one of our closest friends or closest family members, and when we're feeling like we're judging ourselves, or we're feeling ashamed of something, or we're feeling like we've really failed, or we've let ourselves down, we've let our family down, instead of pouring all that shame on, pouring all that judgment on ourselves, because that's what we feel like should happen, the best advice is to look at ourselves and see ourselves like our daughter that we dote on, or our brother that we love, or our best mate that we really, really want to support, and say, okay, if that person was in this situation, what advice would we give them? Like, what would our best mate, if he's heaping judgment on himself for something he's done, what advice would we say or give? What comments would we make to them? And if it's a best mate, or if it's somebody that we're really close to, we might be a tiny bit sarcastic to them and say, "Oh, you're a bit of a doofus, aren't you?" But in the end, we're going to support them, and we're going to say, "This is not the end of the world for you. You made a mistake. So what? all right, you're feeling like the world's against you because of this, but that's like, I'm here to support you. I'm here to like see through it and see past it. So if we would be that positive to our friends, our family, then we have to do the same for ourselves. We have to not see ourselves as worse than those people that we love. And self-love isn't necessarily the bad thing or the narcissistic thing that we think it is. When a lot of people say self-love, they're going to think the narcissism and the people that are just focused on themselves all the time. And that's very, very different to self-esteem, self-love, self-empowerment, and self-care. And with that, I'm not sure whether you've seen any of these videos before, but it did remind me a lot of some of my favorite videos, which is by Brené Brown on shame and vulnerability. And she's probably a very similar job, social researcher, social worker, sociologist, and she studied people's comments on shame. And these videos are amazing. And the research and the outcomes that she's got from studying all this is really, really valuable. And we watch it in rehab. We watch it with like a room full of guys watching this Texas social worker talk about shame, and they can be in tears listening to it. It's pretty good. So that's another cue for when you've got a minute. Actually, no, not a minute. 20 minutes, but if you're watching on 1.25 or 1.5, too easy. All right. So just to move on, jumping past here, to review, we've got to recognize progress. We can't recognize progress if it's not measured. A lot of, even my CEO in Hader, or any CEO, is going to be saying that if it's not written down and it can't be measured, then we're not going to be able to evaluate the progress. So we have to be able to measure progress. We have to be able to measure somebody's progress in therapy, in recovery, which is why quite often they're going to need to do, whether it's a full Victorian AOD assessment that takes an hour and a half, or whether it's a scaled down one, or whether it's a screening tool, an audit assessment, or whether it's maybe a K10 every week. When we're looking at mental health, as this module is, we might do a K10 every week and help, and then bring the results back every week and show them, okay, well, look, I know you're still feeling pretty tough, feeling pretty rough, but looking over the past few weeks, your scores have got actually a little bit higher over a few weeks. DAS test, yeah. Dyslexia, anxiety, stress scale. That's another good one, very similar. No, it's not very similar, but it can work in a slightly different way. So, yeah, so as long as we can measure it, then we can record progress. And then that's the fine line between just constantly assessing them and not actually seeing any enjoyment of life, which is a bit like kids in kindy in the news, that kids are just getting assessed all the time. They're not actually learning much about life or anything useful. They're just getting assessed on what they've been assessed on, and another assessment this week and another test. And it's a shame when people don't have quality of life because they're just getting assessed. And that's not what we want with recovery. So new direction strategies, goal setting's going to be a big part of it. And it's really, really helpful to be able to try and understand how to set goals long term, short term, and medium term. If we're doing it for ourselves, then we'll be more fluid into doing it for somebody else and trying to suggest certain things about short term plans and long term goals, goals to achieve this year, not New Year's resolutions, but completely the opposite to New Year's resolutions. Rather than setting a New Year's resolution or a resolution in the middle of the year that isn't going to be achieved, and then talking somebody through that and saying, okay, well, let's set a proper goal that is going to be reachable and how we're going to do that. Contingency plans. Okay, so you didn't reach that goal. Okay, you haven't had 3 months sober. That's fair enough. You've come back and we're having a chat about it. This is the main thing. Let's set a different plan. Let's do a plan B. It might end up being a plan C or D because of life changing. Specialist expertise. Sometimes you feel like you are going round and round with somebody and they're not really getting anywhere. That might be time that they move on to one of our colleagues, because in the end, I'm wanting the best for the client. They don't feel like they're getting anywhere with me. They might suggest that. I might suggest that. And we say, actually, let's refer you on to somebody different, somebody older, somebody younger, male or female instead, maybe a different service, maybe a different cultural service to one that I'm with. So in the end, it's for the betterment, for the recovery, the client, and evaluation. In the end, it's good to not just with recognizing progress, but recognizing what we've done as well, and evaluating ourselves and evaluating the progress that the client's made. It's not our fault that they've made amazing progress, and it's not our fault if they decide to relapse. That's the key thing. It's our input that have we done what we needed to do, not our best, not the best that we possibly can, but have we put in steps that they can follow, directions, strategies, and goals, and could they understand them? And we obviously need to set boundaries up so that we're not tied with the person's recovery. That's really, really important. It's really, really hard. It's harder than what you were saying about having self-compassion. Sorry, not being linked with somebody's recovery and somebody's therapy, and not feeling like it's partly about us and it's partly to do with some great thing that I've done, or it's some wrong thing that I've done. I did something wrong because they've relapsed. I've done something wrong because they've committed suicide. It's really, really hard, but it's really, really important. Yeah, thanks, Maddie. Alison, sorry. Reflecting is important. I'm just going to bring up something else. In the assessments, all good. I was going to leave the assessments to the end, but I just wanted to mention something. When we're doing these three, this is the 3 role plays that you've got for this module. With counselling, when studying counselling, you might have had there would have been a placement, and with each client goes a self-evaluation, and part of passing the counselling placement was, this is the case study that I had for the client, and this is my evaluation of what I did. It's not an evaluation of them, it's an evaluation of what I've done, in personal reflection. And if there was a counselling placement of 6 weeks, that's like 6 weeks times maybe 10 people a week. So that's 60 people, 60 case studies that we have, and then 60 reflections of each session that we did. That's the type of thing that was expected. And when we're looking at these assessments for this module, especially, it's saying self-reflection and evaluation. We don't have a placement. There's no placement for you to do. But it's really, really important that you have an idea of self-reflection and evaluating what you are doing without you reflecting on the conversations that you had, whether you brought something up at the right time, whether you made a comment that in hindsight you shouldn't have made. And it's not about bringing judgment on yourself. It's about, okay, so that conversation was useful, that comment wasn't. That tool was useful, but that conversation maybe wasn't appropriate at that time. So that we can reflect on our own practice and eventually move on. Because the government is wanting services to move on and be better every single year. The only way services are going to be better every single year is if each person working there is reflecting and evaluating their own practice. And that's for all 3 assessments there. Haven't seen whether it's in all of the assessments, in all of the role plays for the modules, but with this one for mental health and self-reflecting evaluation, it's important. So we'll get back to one of the role plays later. Reflecting, yeah. Reflect on practice, identifying strategies. Not just strategies for the person to set a goal, but a strategy for us to work with the person. So it's about how am I going to deal with talking to this person about something difficult. So difficult conversations are going to come up. So what's our strategy to deal with a difficult conversation? Suicide, for example. How do we address the conversation about suicide? So somebody's thought about it before, or they're known to be self-harming. How do we bring possible suicide up in a conversation? It's important that when in the role plays that it's mentioned as a possibility. It's important that you do mention it. If it's been an issue before, then definitely bring it up in the role play, because that's what it's wanting you to do. Address the elephant in the room, I guess. It's better to mention it in the role play clumsily, even if you're not sure how you're doing it. Just bring it up. And speaking to people who work in suicide or people that have been close to suicide before have been thankful that somebody brings it up, because part of suicide is feeling like you're dealing with something on your own. So you're feeling so alone that you don't realize anybody else might be able to see it or understand. So when somebody speaks into my world and sees that, it's almost healing, that somebody can almost feel like that suicide is less of an option because somebody else sees that I'm feeling alone. Yes, Mark.
The other thing that a lot of people, when they're not used to talking to people around suicide, is that there's a fear that we're going to put the idea, or somehow us talking about it's going to force them or lead them into a position where they want to carry through with it. In my experience, and I've talked to a lot of people surrounding suicide in my past career, I found exactly the opposite. Exactly what you've just been saying, Dwayne. It's almost like you're acknowledging that you're seeing them in the place that they're in and giving them permission to feel that way without necessarily having to act on it. That might not make sense, but that's what I've found. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Serena's just before you go off, Marty, and before I answer, Serena's asking, how do you bring it up?
Oh, look, I'm quite. I'm finding new and different techniques to do it all the time. I find initially when you're not used to doing it, I would just whatever it is that you've noticed. So if you notice that someone is cutting themselves, talk directly to that and what that means for them and why they might be doing it. I also, if they've brought up the subject themselves or if they've talked about past attempts, I'd talk into that itself. If I've done an assessment like a K10 and part of the K10 indicates that they've got a really strong sense of feeling worthless, I'd speak strongly into that and let the K10 do the lead-in work for you. So there's a whole range of different ways to do it, but I don't mince when I do. I don't mince words. I use the word suicide. I speak directly to it because that in itself can be enough of a oh shit. Someone sees me for what I am thinking, and that in itself is that's just the way I do. I'm just very upfront and you know just bring it right to their attention straight away. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And each
True.
person has to find their own technique, own technique. Yeah. But for me, that's how I do it.
Connie's saying the mental health first aid course helped. That is, I was advertising that to Search for last night.
There you
Mental
go.
health first aid, and that you can start by. I've noticed when we say to somebody, I've noticed something, noticed that you're worried. How helpful was the mental health first aid, Connie?
I've worked in the industry for 6 years, like dealing with children and child protection and all that, and it's easily the best training I've ever done, better than university, better than anything I've done, like, because it's such a taboo topic that people feel really like uncomfortable with and dance around. And I think it just changed me, not just being able to have difficult discussions about people's suicidal ideation or thoughts and things like that, just in general, like really exactly what Marty said. Breaking down the idea that if you talk to someone about suicide, you're going to give them the idea. Like, in all honesty, they've already got it if that's what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
So just really normalizing it. And like I said, it was the best training I've ever done. I really recommend it. It's a single day course you can do, guys. And it's probably stuck with me more than anything. And just, yeah, if you're asking someone like I kind of wrote in there, like, have you had thoughts of hurting yourself? Like, what does that look like? Like, how can I help? It's kind of like the Are You Okay Day conversations, but just with concept in there. But yeah, highly recommend it to anyone that is really struggling in that area.
I think, like you said, a lot of time, or the way I used to think, I'm going to be putting the thought in their head. Well, suicide takes such an irrational mind to carry out that there's no possible way I could put this irrational thought into a rational mind. It just wouldn't work. And then maybe moving towards my thought was, I know, but what if they're nearly there and I've suggested this and then I push them over the edge? Then it doesn't work like that. Like Marty and Connie have both said, it goes completely the other way. What? You mean you've recognized it? I can't believe it. And it breaks them free almost. And it's not suddenly fixed, but it means that you've started a conversation, a connection where somebody can call you and say, "Look, I've been feeling suicidal all morning. I really needed to talk to you," and that's the connection that it makes. It's not that it puts an idea into their head or do something. Yeah, it's useful. So identifying strategies. I can't remember how I got onto for suicide from that. Oh, it was Serena said, "How do you bring it up?" sometimes, like a lot of times with Marty's full on, he said, and just jump straight in. Maybe Connie does as well. I've stepped it and said, okay, you look like you're feeling down, you're feeling stressed. How stressed? And then it starts to go down and down and down. Oh, really? Like you're feeling like the world is against you. Okay, how long do you feel like that? And maybe the questions on a K10, like a few questions that it asks, just like having them in your head. Okay, how often, like over the past 7 days, have you felt like you're so ashamed that you can't face people? Okay, and how, like, have you have you thought about what you would do if this is too overwhelming? And you could get like two answers quite often. No, I've never really thought anything more than that. It's just I just feel really, really ashamed. But as people get lower and lower, yes, I have thought about how my family would feel if I wasn't around. I have thought about that. The big clincher, apparently, is when there's a plan already in place. It's almost not unusual to feel suicidal at certain times with certain severe mental health conditions. It's like normal if we're going through a really bad time to feel like it would be better without us. But to have a plan built and to know when, where, how, implements, medications, that's a lot of people, that's not the cry for help. That's a serious plan that people need help. Yeah. So hope that helps, Serena, hopefully. But anyway, mental health first aid, yeah, definitely. And planning for improvement is part of the goals and strategies. So the reflective cycle, when we are reflecting on our own practice, our own work, the interaction that we've got. So we've got a description. What feelings did that bring about? The description is maybe a conversation with the client. So we had a conversation with the client and it went really well. It was good. How did that make us feel? And when I'm saying feelings, I'm not meaning emotions, I'm meaning actual feelings. Feelings are the things that we feel in our body. So my heart felt energized because they were leaving the office really empowered today. I might have had butterflies. I felt like I couldn't really sit still because it was just going so well. So feelings, that's the feeling side. Evaluate the conversation and evaluate, okay, yeah, I think it went well. It didn't take very long. It was a simple conversation. And I think I can work that in somewhere else. And maybe it was part of motivational interviewing. Maybe it was like a short segment, but when you break it down, you could repeat that anytime. Analyze. Analyze is not evaluate. It's like in a exam question, a test question, we've evaluated something, but then analyze, break it down, restructure it. Could we repeat it? Can we make it better? Why did it happen? What would we do slightly different next time with the analysis? Conclude. What do we conclude from it? What's like, we had that conversation. It made us feel great. We knew they were feeling better because of it. I'm going to try and repeat that when I can. To conclude, that's my practice working well. So what am I going to do because of the conclusion? Well, I'm definitely going to do it again. Yes, Madison.
Sorry. Are we talking about the Gibbs reflective cycle?
You're going to have to do these classes soon.
We are.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just asking because I've just seen that we're covering a lot of content that we covered last week. Like a lot of the same stuff.
Yes, it does overlap. But yes, that's the Gibbs reflective cycle. I thought you just reading 3 months ahead again, and
Sorry.
You've got a new perspective on the trans-theoretical model again,
No.
or the harm minimization.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Dwayne.
Sorry. No, yeah. So there's another video for the Gibbs reflective cycle. Yes, sorry. Throwing me off again. All right. So moving on. Oh, look, there it is again. I'll give you the link just in case you didn't see it. And I'll put the link in the chat. This is important. The government, as I've said a couple of times, can't say it enough. The government is wanting us to evaluate our own practice, whatever area of community services we're in. If we're working in business, the employer is going to be, or the industry is wanting us to have KPIs that will get better each term. Whether we're working on KPIs or we're working in community services and we're evaluating our own practice, we have to do it periodically, and it's got to improve us. This is just to finish off a couple of things. We'll share screen. So just finishing off what we've been looking at in the PowerPoint slides this week, connected with the learning guide. It's all in the learning guide, obviously. Social well-being, social networks, emotional well-being, cognitive aspects affecting well-being, cultural, spiritual well-being, reviewing, reflecting on what the client has done. We can reflect on their recovery, we can reflect on their therapy, how they've been able to help themselves. But we're also reviewing, reflecting on our own practice as well, and how to examine your own bias, the reflective cycle. Our bias is there. Our bias will always be there. We're not robots until AI takes over and has no bias at all and starts to do drug and alcohol counseling without any bias or prejudice. Then we'll still have a job, but we'll always be biased in a certain way. And it's important to recognize the bias. It's not to try and remove the bias. It's try and recognize it and say, I can't work with this client because of this bias, or I can work with this client and it's my bias is not going to interfere. Bias can be extreme with working with a client that's seriously PTSD, had serious amount of PTSD. If our PTSD is very similar or even triggered by their trauma, then it's a legitimate reason to say, I can't possibly talk to this person and need to pass this on to somebody else. And it's not about being prejudiced. If we did that because we don't understand, we've never lived through the kind of racial trauma that somebody else has gone through, then that shouldn't mean we can't be a caseworker for them. It shouldn't mean we can't counsel them. It shouldn't mean we can't work with them. But if they prefer somebody that has lived experience, that's fair enough. That's perfectly open for them to ask. Or if we would prefer to have them work with somebody with lived experience, that's equally also can work. It doesn't have to, but it can work. All good. See you later, Amy. With the self-compassion, bit of an activity. So this works both ways. And to set it up, I can remember there was a guy in rehab, and I really didn't understand why I didn't like him. I just couldn't get on with him. He really irritated me. He really just wound me up. Like unprofessionally, I just could not. I could not gel with him. Thankfully, he wasn't. I wasn't meant to be working with him. But even when I spoke to him, I just thought I can't bear to be around this person. So I was chat. It wasn't a psychologist session, but I'd seen the psychologist in the staff room and said, "Oh, just general chit chat." He mentioned this other guy, and I said, "Ah, really can't like understand that guy. He just really winds me up, and I can't seem to like gel with him just relationally, socially." And he said, "What?" He said, "What is it about him?" No, he said, "What is it about yourself that you see in him that you don't like?" And I thought, all right, that was harsh. So for a start, that blew me away, and I started to think about myself a little bit more deeply to start with. But on the other side, this activity, I want you to think about somebody that you really like to role model yourself on for whatever reason. You respect them, you think they're really, really good. It could be a politician, it could be like a mentor in your life, somebody that you've been looking up to for a long time. Pick 3 characteristics that you respect them for, and just write 1 or 2 of the characteristics down in the chat. Doesn't matter who it is. Could be parent, could be sibling, could be mate, it could be like life coach, psychologist, like literally anybody. Brave, outspoken, and confident. All right. Yeah, it's good. Integrity, honesty, and empathic. Not empathetic. Yeah. Caring, driven, motivated, relaxed family, honesty, strong, self-aware. All right. Creative. Yeah. So the same psychological process of my old mate psychologist is saying that them 3 characteristics that you've recognized in that person, that is you tuning in to things about you that you see in them. That's why you like them so much. So I'll just go down them and say, Ian, why is it that you are so relaxed, family orientated, and full of honesty? Like, why is it? How did you get to be like that? Who else? Marty. I've lost it. Marty. Integrity, honesty, and empathetic. How did you get to be like that, Marty? Because you're recognizing that in other people. How did you get to be so full of integrity and empathic or empathetic? Don't know what the difference is. It might be a different word. At the very least, that theory says we recognize them things in that person because that is who we want to be like. But psychologists are taking it further and saying, no, it's not that we want to be like them. It's that we already are those characteristics. That's why we like it so much. I'm not a psychologist, but it's just what they're saying. Right, so I think we should have an early break because I was wanting to jump onto the assessments and role play afterwards. Quick question. When I brought up the role plays earlier on, did you see when I was looking at this? No. All right. All right, I'll do this again because it needed to be seen. When I was talking about reflecting, looking at our self-reflection, looking at our own practice, and the looking at our practice through perspective of mental illness, not AOD, but looking at our practice and evaluating it and reflecting on it doesn't necessarily happen. It's not necessarily asked for in all of the role plays. It's not necessarily asked for in many of the assessments, but this module, it's asking for it. So that's where I wanted to leave it anyway. We'll go for a break and have 10 minutes from now, and then we'll look at some role plays afterwards. As far as I can remember, but we didn't really look at any assessments. When Vicky was here, did you look at any of the role plays? No. All right. So I'll go into detail for. Might as well do this one. What's happened here? Oh, sorry, I'll just say a little bit again. We're just reading down this. We're looking at task 3 of 4 of the role plays. It is about mental health specifically, even though we're studying AOD, yeah. So assess the person's well-being and plan appropriately prior to completing a meeting with the client. So you've got all the resources in place. You've got maybe the K10 printed off or the DAS printed off. Maybe you've done it a few times before and you've got all of their previous scores. So you're going to have them printed off just in case some inspiration is needed for them. And you want them to say, look how far you've come. Look, all this, it's on paper. The template provided will guide you in the information you have required together, and that may be used in your client meeting. That's all your information there, but I just wanted to read about Jane. Jane's at 38. Is that 38? I've got a massive screen and I can't see whether it's 38 or 36-year-old woman who was involved in a serious car. Scary. Who's involved in a serious car accident that left her with a spinal cord injury. As a result of the injury, she's now paraplegic and requires a wheelchair for mobility. Prior to the accident, Jane was an active and outgoing person who enjoyed hiking, camping, and spending time with friends and family. She was a successful business owner and had a supportive partner, but the accident has left her feeling isolated and uncertain about her future. You're to play the role of Maria Camberwell, a case manager for First Access. Jane has recently been referred to you to assist with delivering collaborative wellbeing support that affects recovery-orientated practice. Recovery-orientated meaning not necessarily recovery from the paraplegia, but recovery from any significant mental health condition that she's undergoing. Small tangent again, I'm sorry. I read a book a few years ago about a Navy SEAL that dived in Sydney Harbour and got attacked by a shark and was left with literally just one arm. And he had to rebuild his life because of that. It was a fantastic story. This would, if after reading what he went through, it would almost be Jane's story as well. All right, sorry, no, there is no done question, Serena. It's fine. This is on Accelerate, the learning portal. You might not have looked at any of your assessments yet, and that's fine. That doesn't matter. But this is the practical part of your assessment. So on here, the government website says you need to know skills and knowledge. So skills and knowledge, the knowledge is all the facts that you get a little online quiz, an online quiz or a written questions, and you just got to answer name 3 areas of people's social contacts, things like that. But the skills are in here in the role plays. And we measure the skills by completing role plays for every assessment, or for every module nearly. It means that by the time you've finished your diploma, you've probably done about 20 role plays, something like that. Yes, part 3 in assessment, that's right. If you can't find it now, it's not important that you know how to access it right now. It's good enough just to look on here. So yeah, the empathy of seeing what's happened to Jane. So she was an active, outgoing person, enjoying being very, very physical outdoors, really like life affirming, and then finding that she literally can't do that. It almost paralleled this. It was a really good book. If you like reading this biography, he jumped into Sydney Harbour. He's a Navy SEAL. He's extremely active, athletic, and the shark takes him out. And he's left to rebuild his life again. And he openly talks about the depression. He said he was suicidal, but what could he possibly do? Which made him feel even worse. He wasn't even in a position where he could make a choice to commit suicide. That's the type of thing that we're looking at here. Doesn't say she's suicidal, but it says she's feeling isolated and uncertain about the future. Yes, Marty.
Mate, because this is through First Access, is that right? Do we
Yes,
have to
that's right.
do we have to find our own person to play the client in this position? Is that the idea,
Yeah.
or is
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
so
carry on. Keep going.
yeah, so if I've got if I've got someone who's prepared to, play the part of I can't even remember her name, but of the client in this situation, then
Yeah.
we don't have to wait on accessing an assessor to do this.
That's correct.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you might be able to get a decent actor. So yeah,
Nicole Kidman.
So you've got Jane. Jane is the client, and you are Maria. So it's 2 females. It doesn't matter whether you're a male staff member, you're still playing Maria. And it doesn't matter whether your friend who's playing the client is a male or not, they're playing Jane. That's what we do. Yes, Sarah.
Sorry, because this is my first one as well, and obviously this one's assessor led, so I'm a bit nervous. So do we have to set it up that we obviously film it and then upload it to you? Yeah. Okay, so am I able to talk to you afterwards about that, or do I contact an LSO?
Yeah. No, we can. It's very preemptive, but yes. There's no stress about uploading it yet.
No, I know. It's just I'm just worrying about how to do it.
That's fine. That's all right.
Sarah,
Yeah.
there's some really good information on Accelerate in announcements with regards to how to go about filming. So you can do it on a mobile phone, or they give you some really good information on how to go about doing that. Yeah, so I'd have a look at that.
Okay, thanks heaps, Marty. That's great. I will.
I'm just looking for how long it's got to be. This one doesn't say. They're normally 10 minutes, but Diploma has a lot of 15, 20-minute ones here and there. So if you can imagine a conversation, sorry, it's a series of conversations in the end, isn't it? Conversations between Jane and Maria that lasts about 10 minutes. It's going to start with privacy and confidentiality. Whether you do the full conversation or not is entirely up to you, but you've got to mention it. You've got to bring in disclosure, confidentiality. I'll mention that we've already talked about it, so let's carry on with what we were talking about. And then the rest of it, you would give a brief overview of this beforehand as well, and say what your plan is overall and what you would like to work with her on, and what is it that you're wanting to do. So the video would start with, for 10 minutes, you'd start with, okay, I'm working with Jane. She's a 38-year-old woman who'd been paraplegic after a car accident. She's successful, really, really active business owner. But now, because of the accident, she feels a bit lost, isolated, not sure about the future. I would like to talk to her about what her goals were beforehand. I would like to look at what goals she has now and see if I can empower her to still accessing some sort of social networks. What social networks can she still facilitate? Something like that. That might be, and then it goes straight into your role play. So you'd start with talking to her, and you'd be saying, okay, so everything's confidential that I'm talking to you about, unless in conversation something comes up where somebody's at risk of harm. It could be yourself. It could be a child that's at risk. It could be yourself from yourself or from somebody else. So if anybody's at risk of harm, then that potentially breaks the confidentiality, and we'll pass it. We might need to pass it on to somebody for our advice, for my advice. This was one question last week. Not sure if it was answered or I missed it. Didn't see the end of that. Does it matter who we use to do the role play with? No. For example, my husband or 16-year-old daughter. Off the top of my head, I'm sure they've got to be an adult. So if they're clearly a child, then the role play will be unsatisfactory because we're meant to be working with adults at the moment. There's different youth work assessments where you might need to go into that with children's work. But for this, anybody that's an adult, anybody that you know with this, it works better if they know what you're doing and they know why and they know a bit of the topic. So ideally, it's going to be classmates because they're not going to be too harsh, and they know that you're the one that's getting assessed, not them. And they know that they don't need to be Nicole Kidman or Hugh Jackman. And they know a little bit about the topic, and they're going to answer the right questions in the right way. And if you forget to ask someone about serious mental health issues, they're going to say, yeah, I am struggling a bit after all. I know you didn't mention, even if you don't mention it. but then looking at the screen, this is useful as well. On all of the role plays, you'll have one of these. Oh, that's not it. Darn. Right. You usually get some notes that the client is going to be reading from, or researching on. So it'll tell you a little bit about the client, or the client from the client's point of view as well. I think the best thing to do now is just I'll end the recording for this week. Everybody's back. Sorry it was brief. It's meant to be longer than that, but I probably waffled on too much at the beginning trying to describe what everything was meant to be doing. Usually I'd like to set apart 15 minutes so that everybody can at least do a 5-minute go at it and swap it around so that everybody gets to be the staff member. Everybody gets to listen to the staff member as the client, and everybody gets to watch the reaction between the two so that everybody learns from something. Even though the role play is going to be at least 10 minutes. So usually you only plan for like 5 minutes practice in the role play, but you're literally doubling that at least, maybe even 15 minutes for other ones. So there's certain conversations that you might always remember to drop in. You might decide to put in a full description of confidentiality and what it means, or things like that. Was it helpful? Was it freaky? Was it too late to be doing that? Or
Phil and I sort of tried to do a bit of a sample role play because we had a couple of new students that hadn't specifically seen or experienced role play, so we tried to give a little bit of an example of how it would run.
They did a great job.
Excellent. Anybody else? I enjoyed the chat and the guidance from Ian and Justin. Cool. Like it was mentioned earlier, somebody asked everybody's asking if it can be done, who's meant to be done with. There's a small handful out of the 20-something role plays that you've got to do. There's a small handful that have to be done with an assessor. So you can't do it with a friend or family member. You've got to do it with a staff member from HADA live, and they would record it, and then you would upload, and the assessor would assess you as you working, which is difficult. It doesn't get assessed as you're talking to them. They play it back and watch it again later on. But this one, all three of them, you can pick any one you want. Just so you can't even get confused. I'll just share screen a second quickly. When it is an unusually different one, it says up here, right at the top of your screen, in bright red type, like here.
You're not showing it, Glenn.
Is it not working yet?
It's got your car on it.
Oh, how cool is that? That is an amazing car. It's not my car.
I thought it would have been but coming from England, you would have definitely had a Mini Cooper.
Yeah, I wish. My mum's got one. So in here, you can't even get confused. At the top of the assessment, it says, this assessment must be done online, live with an assessor in bright red type. So you would know. And because it doesn't, it's straight away, you're fine. And then just to be clear, just if there's any doubt, write down, what do you have to do? Do you upload a document? Do you upload any templates, any workbooks, or any resources? No, you upload the completed assessment from Mary for this one, and then in the other part, it describes role play video to upload. So it tells you exactly what you need to do and where you need to put it. Which, when they get it right, it's great. So I'm going to leave it